Hi, welcome everybody. We're glad to see you. We're glad you're here. We'll take a couple minutes as people start entering the Zoom room. As we do that, please find the chat box and introduce yourself. Say hello, tell us where you're joining from and a little bit about where you work in terms of evaluation or another role. Another bit of housekeeping. Welcome if you just joined. Please say hello in the chat. Introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining from, a bit about your evaluation work. Awesome, thanks for getting us started, Janet. And if you look at the bottom row on Zoom, there's an option for live transcripts and closed captioning. So we've got some closed captioners joining if you would like that. Just click on the live transcript, and then also there's one more option, I think, as you click on it so that you can see the words as we follow along. You can also do like me and like go across on your Zoom and see faces that are familiar and faces that are new. I know some of us know each other, some of us know each other within our states, but not across state. Yes, Andres is the master of our logo. So Andres, you're getting some good feedback in the chat.
Delightful. Thank you, folks. Shared effort.
I think we'll go ahead and get started, and we've got some different people that will continue to let those joining from the waiting room into the main room. So welcome. My name is Emily Gates. I'm an assistant professor of evaluation at Boston College. I'm one on a team that's co-leading this SEAM collaborative initiative, and it's a collaboration between Boston College and the Greater Boston Evaluation Network, GBEN. The current or incoming president of GBEN is Min Ma, and she couldn't join us today. So I'm here playing the host role. And then we've also got a fantastic team, Andres, Trish, Joe, and Kayla, and Maya. They're all here. You'll hear them speak at different times. Another piece of this is that we've got an awesome advisory group. In the first meeting, we announced everybody in terms of their names, and their bios are on the website. So we're going to save time by getting right into this meeting purpose, but you will hear from different people as the meeting unfolds. So this is a network strengthening capacity for equity in New England evaluation. It's a collaborative. I'll talk a little bit about, again, why it got started. We do have funding from Bar Foundation, so we want to acknowledge Yvonne Belanger and Rory Nooner, who with their support have really made this possible on the Bar side. We also have support from Boston College, the Institute for Liberal Arts, and then, as I said, we partner with GBEN around this. So it's a collaborative effort in terms of funding and also in terms of design. Thanks, Andres. Yes, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat as you go, and those on the line, check it out and see who's here. So a little bit about why we're here. We are here to learn and grow together. We're not offering content. We're actually partners with you in terms of thinking about what equity means in our work and how to do our work better. What you see on the screen are two quotations from the SEAM study. This was a study that we did, let's see, in 2020. And we had a survey and an interview component. And what we really heard from the interview data is this desire to talk with other evaluators. Some of us do work on teams, some of us work in big organizations, but we don't always get the chance to step back, reflect on our practice and talk, particularly across organization and across state lines. And so yes, these two quotes point to the fact that, hey, let's get together and let's talk about our work. On this slide are also links to the visual report and the full report if you haven't seen that and you're curious about it. We will make this link, so the slides are living in Miro, which is what we're going to be using, and we'll make that link available. So you'll have access to those as the meeting goes on and then afterwards as well. Next slide, Andres. And as I'm talking, I just want to see so far if there's anyone on the team that wanted to point to anything. As I said, Min and I were going to do a back and forth, but Min can't be here. So I just want to see if I've missed anything so far on the team. Okay, I'm not seeing any interruptions. So here's what we've got planned in terms of the event series. In October, we had a kickoff focused on building community, just telling, okay, here's what we've got envisioned and getting some input from you. Today's topic, which we'll dig into, is cultivating ourselves and teams around equity. And then this is the setup for the initial idea for the themes for each subsequent event. And these came out of the study and this idea that we as individual evaluation practitioners do have important roles to shape the idea of equity and how equitable our practices can be, but we also work in an ecosystem. And so there are all these other influences on our practice. And so we're going to move from ourselves outward in the course of the themes to then think about what this might mean and look like at these different levels and in partnership with different people. So for the April event, we wanted to focus on contractual, thinking about funders and our partners around negotiating contracts, thinking about the funding, as well as internally our organizations and how they can support the work. This summer, we'll have a meetup for Collab streams, which we will talk more about, but that'll be just a chance to connect and work on something together if you want to do that. In October, we're planning something really focused on stakeholder participation, research methodology, and unpacking ideas of rigor from an equity lens. And then in January, again, this is tentative, a whole year from now, thinking much more broader about our culture of evaluation, our standards, and a kind of accountability that we can sort of create to reinforce some of this in terms of what needs to change professionally, and then what we can help normalize as we shift our practices. And then culminating in April in 2023, we hope to have a showcase where we just get to hear from different people what they've been working on as part of this initiative or outside of this initiative in terms of their practices, and just literally hear from different people's worlds in terms of what they're up to. So that's the event series. More about that coming, and we're also going to meet with the advisory group to get some more input around that. So today's topic and framing, oh, this is our agenda for today. So I will set up the topic a little bit and then hand it over to Joe, who will get us into an exercise. So I'll tell you now, if you have some paper, markers, drawing materials handy, or you're welcome to also use some sort of app on your computer to do it, but you'll have a reflective time at the beginning of the session to do some journey mapping. Then we're going to break out into small groups around themes. Some of those we've set and some of those you could bring. So you'll get a chance to talk about what you want in relation to this topic with each other. And then we'll do some cross-group sharing and some next steps. And I better say on this fifth thing, we have a raffle. So as I said, we have a budget, a small budget, but still we've got funds and we've tried to come up with ways to distribute those as we go. So we will have gift cards to buy books is what we're encouraging, something you want to read related to the topic that then you could tell us about in terms of what you're reading. So Joe will draw some winners out of those who are attending and we'll announce that at the end of the meeting. Again, feel free, team, if I've missed anything so far. Okay, so this was Min's piece, but for those of you that were at the first meeting, we were really have been looking at this book, Emergent Strategy, talking about it in terms of how we think about this work and it not being totally predetermined and planned, but rather us getting together around a vision and then thinking about what would that look like to co-create that over time and what could come out of that. This concept of fractals is really important, and Adrienne Marie Brown writes about it from complex adaptive systems and complexity science and studies of nature, and thinking about scale and how we are in relation to ourselves and in relation to others and in relation to our communities in this work matters, because those same patterns show up in our larger structures and systems. So the idea behind the theme today, to start with ourselves and thinking about our teams, is that how we set up that work actually does ripple out at larger scales. A bit more framing, again, we're all entering into the conversation from different places. So we offered some pre-readings, and since we offered some pre-readings, we want to hit on some of those highlights from the readings in case you didn't have time to engage with them. But those are things that we've heard from you in terms of recommendations, and also recommendations that we're writing. So these are a couple summary points, again, from two main authors, Drs. Hazel Simonette and Jory Hall. So we're going to be talking about the idea of privilege in relation to ourselves and teams. And this idea that depending on your identity, your lived experience in relation to a particular situation, you might be granted privileges, but be unaware of them. You're so used to them that you don't recognize them. And on the flip side, this second bullet, Hazel Simonette points out that at the same time, people who are not so situated with within the power privilege hierarchy tend to be hypersensitive and aware of that privilege and that disparity between them, given its survival framing consequences. So this idea of privilege being potentially invisible and also highly visible, depending on, again, your identity and how you're situated. And then thinking about this idea of fractals and scales, these relationships around privilege do then manifest as dominance, right, in terms of how they show up, and that can show up across scales. There are a couple other points here in thinking about privilege. It's not static. So aspects of your identity can be marginalized in one situation and not in another. It can be fluid and operate differently across different levels and highly entrenched in our cultures. This includes our organizational cultures, again, in terms of our ways of working. And as I said, invisible potentially to those who benefit from them. Welcome if you just joined. I'm doing a bit of framing up for the session, and then in just a few minutes, you'll be asked to do some reflection and some drawing on your own. Yes, so just to remind us too, when we think about equity, and this actually doesn't factor in the environmental perspective, it's all about the social perspective, but there are so many different things to think about intersectionally, including race and including ethnicity, but also including many other dimensions to who we are and how our experience is in the world. So this is to start to cue you up to thinking about how you're located in relation to your work and in relation to your team, and also acknowledging that these things do change over our life courses. Some of them do, and some of them intersect, and some of them can be privileged or disadvantaged in different situations. Yes, and then a point again, this is quoting Karen Cartcart's work, which some of you might know around multicultural validity. But this is to say that while we have some understanding of privilege, we can actually do a better job at naming it and thinking about what it means and assessing it and checking each other with regards to how it might influence our bias, our lenses. And that we could do that in relation to our training. So that could be methodological training, disciplinary training. It could also be related to our cultures and our identities. And so what we're hoping to do together then is reflect on our own journeys and think about privilege, bias, and how these things show up in our work, and what that might mean then for how we construct our teams and the kind of learning and growth we want to do. So with that, I will hand it over to Joe.
Hello, everybody. So as our resident arts educator and researcher, I'm going to go over the journey mapping exercise. There's a bunch of different kind of visualization methods that can be used in evaluation and research, but also in evaluation teams to do this kind of critical self-reflection and tracing back the different stages of our life and where certain personal biases might have come from contextually, where privilege was present and how it shifts depending on context. So if you don't already, find even just some scrap paper, pencil. If you have fancier items, if you want to add color and things like that, you can, but you will not be assessed for your artistic ability. So this activity is more about reflecting on your life journey, and that you can start as far back as you want, but it's really about trying to reflect in a visual sense and using pictures, symbols, text, to trace and help better understand
Will you switch slides? Sorry, Joe.
how your life experience might be impacting your work as an evaluator in relation to your team and stakeholders and other people that you work with. So the invitation, using simple drawings, pictures, symbols, and text, you're going to do this mapping, and we're using mapping very broadly. Some can structure as a timeline. You don't have to do it in a linear fashion. As you see in the helpful tips at the bottom, I recommend that you decide on some of what you would consider your most significant life stages first that you want to include, and then decide how you sort of are composing your image to navigate or flow through those different stages, and see particularly what bounding events might have caused a shift from one life event to the next, how privilege might have shifted in those contexts, how awareness of privilege and bias might have occurred in those shifts. So yeah, consider, obviously you're going to include yourself and the different ways your positionality, beliefs, and goals might have shown up, other influential relationships and people, what institutions were there, school, legal system, and any types of interactions with contexts that might have developed personal biases and that might have made you aware and become particularly attuned to certain kinds of privilege and bias. So the two guiding questions down here to guide your creation: how would you illustrate your story of your professional journey and significant stages or influences along the way? And how has your journey shaped the perspectives, privileges, and or biases you bring to your evaluation work? All right, so that's what we're gonna invite you to do for the next 20 minutes minus how long I just talked.
Yeah, probably 15 to 20 minutes. We'll check in with you about after 15. This is also an invitation to have some pause time, which we've heard we don't often get. So feel free to turn your cameras off. Know in advance, we're not asking you to share this. This might be, we've all done it as a team, and then we talked about ours. 20 minutes is only a little bit of time, so it might get you going. But you'll have the option, you can share it in the second part of the event if you want. You're also totally welcome not to, and we've got other things in terms of topics to talk about. So feel free to turn your camera off, and we will nudge you via the chat when we're ready to come back together as a large group. We're also here by chat, so if you have questions, feel free to raise them in the chat and we can talk to.
So as you re-emerge and come back to the space, just give yourself a moment to transition and notice what you're experiencing, maybe what surfaced during the journey mapping exercise. If there's anything you'd like to share, feel free to do so in the chat. Just pause for a moment in quiet reflection. So we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so in small group discussions. So we surfaced 4 topics that emerged from the SEAM study, but we also want to give folks space to share your journey maps if you wanted to, or maybe reflect on the exercise. So there's a small group for that if you'd like, as well as other emergent topics. So if there's anything that came up for you, there's room to gather with others. So if there's anything that you'd like to share to discuss, there's another opportunity to share a topic in the chat as well. And then I will hand it over to Andres to help us navigate the Miro board.
Sure. Hi, folks. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes giving a quick orientation to Miro in case this is your first time using it, or if you haven't used it in a couple of weeks. A bit of the formatting has recently changed. So in this next slide, I'm going to show the landing page where you're going to arrive once we share the link to the Miro board via the chat window. What you'll find is that all of these different topics that Trish was just mentioning are hyperlinked to a specific part of the Miro board. And you're going to be welcome to self-select to join any of these 10 small groups. So if you are interested in, for example, further discussing the journey mapping debrief, you can just join the breakout room number 10 on Zoom. And once you open the Miro board, you'll just want to hover over to this link that appears over here, and that will redirect you to this new part of the Miro board, where alongside the colleagues that join you in that breakout room, you'll be able to have a conversation and then take some notes. Now you'll notice here that there is some additional maneuvering that you can do on the Miro board. The first thing that I'll invite you to consider doing once you have this link open is that if you come to the upper right-hand side and hover over to this little cursor looking thing, this allows you to either show or hide other people's cursors. It can get a little bit overwhelming to see everyone's cursors. So I think that that will hopefully give you a bit more of a sense of direction. The second part is that if you want to then just zoom out and take a look at the whole screen, this is basically one large canvas board that we've been using. You can do that on the lower right-hand side. So you can just go ahead and use that on the Zoom on the lower right-hand side. And ultimately, our invitation for the way that we would like for you to consider using this part of the board is to be able to take some notes. If you want to add text on Miro, you can use that by selecting the text option on the menu that is on the left-hand side. And you can also do that by adding post-it notes that you can select here, and you can type whatever you would like. Towards the end of the time, we're going to also encourage you to think a little bit about some type of summative takeaway from your small group conversation so that we can share in a larger share. So be sure to maybe consider using this upper right-hand side of your board to take some notes that we can then share out in the larger group. So that should hopefully offer some general guidance on how to navigate Miro. If you have any questions, you're welcome to, of course, reach out in the main room and let us know. In just a couple of seconds, we're going to drop the link to the Miro board through the chat window, and we're also going to open the breakout rooms for the Zoom group. So you should.
Can I speak to the 4 topics just very
absolutely go for it.
Can you pull up that screen again? So 2 pieces of housekeeping too. 1, the meeting's being recorded and that'll be available later whenever we're in large groups. When we're in small groups, we will not be recording. If you would like the closed captioners who are here to join your group so that you have that service, just send us a chat and we'll ask them to go to your group so that you can see that the text coming up. Another bit of housekeeping is that we are hoping this Miro board will be available publicly on the website as a repository then of our conversation and our notes. So there are, I don't know how many people are here, 36, there were 43 before, and about 93 or 94 registered. So there are a lot of people that had schedule conflicts that couldn't make it for whatever reason, but we still want to make sure that they get clued in on some of the highlights from the conversations. So keep that in mind with your notes with the Miro board overall. In terms of the 4 topics that came out of the study, more topics came out of the study for sure, but these were the ones that were really connected to self and team. The first one is about white supremacy culture in organizations, which is really about what are some of those norms in our ways of working that are not inclusive, that are not equitable, that are problematic, particularly for evaluators of color, but also for other groups who different dimensions of their identity must be maybe marginalized in relation to those. And a lot of them, to me, are like they're very familiar in terms of ways of working. So the invitation there is to name some of those things, question aspects of your organizational culture and what you might do about it. The second one, processes to receive critical feedback. So this is really something that multiple people said was important. How do we build into our process? This could be the contracting process. It could be reviews of deliverables. It could be reviews of, in the middle pieces of the evaluative process. But how do we actually get either internally or externally really good checks on the quality of our work through an equity lens? So that second topic is how to strategize. Maybe you've got some ideas and ways of working that you're willing to share. That's the second topic. The third topic is thinking about the challenges that evaluators of color, particularly racial and ethnic minority evaluators, in the context of New England that we're in the spaces in our organizations, they are not balanced by race and ethnicity by any means. We heard a lot about white dominant culture, but also leadership in terms of when you go up the leadership structure. So the third group is an invitation to think about your workplace, your teams, and how you might, again, come up with strategies around supporting evaluators of color in doing the evaluation work. And again, some of you already have good strategies in place, so you could share those. And then the fourth, partnership development, what we mean there is really thinking about broadening the expertise that goes into an evaluation. So this could mean a larger firm partnering with a smaller firm. It could also mean thinking about how stakeholders are involved in the evaluation process, doing capacity building, which people talked about, training workshops, bringing in new evaluators who don't have prior experience, but you have some sort of outreach or training component. All of those would fall under partnership development. Again, thinking about capacity within your evaluation team. I think that's enough. And then the emergent topics are like, I want to have something where you shuffle cards or you spin it and you just show up and then say, okay, who's here? Let's connect. What do we want to talk about? So it's just pick a room and see who's there. And then if you're not feeling it or you decide I really want to dig deeper into something else, you're free to hop and just shift rooms. Okay, thanks, Andres, for letting me chime in there.
No problem, folks. You have the Miro link and open all rooms right now. So you should be able to now select by going on the breakout rooms option of Zoom and assign yourself to any of them. They are matched by number.
Andres, on mine, it looks like oh, there we go. Sorry, I got it. Feel free to ask us questions in the chat or just go off mute and let us know.
I think we're not seeing the I'm not seeing the breakout room button yet.
That's so on mine, Andres, it says assign, but I don't know what it looks like from participant perspectives.
We don't have chat, share screen, live transcript reactions. There's no breakout button.
Yeah. Let me just close and try that one more time then. All right, we just try to recreate the rooms. Let's see if we see any movement here. I don't see anyone self-selecting.
I don't see the option at the bottom there.
I'll call Julia, Andres, while you.
I see them now.
Yeah, now you can
Great.
see the breakout rooms.
All right, we just had to recreate them. Thanks for your patience, folks.
Hi, everyone. We're waiting on a couple. No, we're not. Let's see. It's hard for me to tell. No. So I was in one group. Thanks for letting me hop in. And two notices. Like one, I think for our own reflection in the future, we'll get somebody to just play the role of note taker so that you can really be present for the conversation and someone is taking notes. So that if you have other feedback on process, we're going to ask for that at the end of the meeting, of course, in a feedback form. But in terms of right now, I think we actually want to invite you to go back to your group and just take a couple minutes to reflect on what came up in our conversation that would be worthwhile to bring to the larger group. Because we were going to then, well, let's see the time, spend a couple minutes sharing out some of those things across group before we transition into our raffle and closing. I'm kind of like looking now, do groups feel like they need that time, or are you ready to share out?
I would appreciate time to go back to the group.
Thanks, Jade. Yeah, I thought it was a bit abrupt. Okay, so let's go back to our group, spend a couple minutes there, and really you'll probably have some time, like 1 or 2 things that you can share with the larger group. And if you can put it on a bigger post-it in the corner, great. If not, just designate somebody to speak to it verbally. Okay, so pause, head back to your groups, and you'll have about 2 minutes or 3 minutes to talk through, okay, what would we share back?
I just want to pick up on Alyssa's last point and dig into it. I thought we were just starting to get somewhere and we got pulled out of the room.
I know.
Oh, Alyssa, you're on mute.
Kathleen, what were you saying about photo voice? I really wanted to hear what your comment was.
Know, I was going to say, Alyssa, I can if you're on the Slack, I can send you a message through the system. But just really quickly, I was thinking that actually maybe a hybrid sort of. I think your observation is incredibly important, but it very well may be that participants are excited about doing a one-time kind of, this is how I experience the program, a photo voice thing, either, on Zoom now.
Hi.
Welcome back. Hopefully that gave you a couple more minutes. I know it's really hard balance. We're trying to balance time and then also, giving you space to have those conversations. I did hear some people say they would connect in the Slack offline or online, but off this meeting. So that's available, but also feel free to share each other's email if you want. So again, we're all here. We can connect outside of this too. So I just want to sort of remind you to do that if we want to follow up with people. Given our time, we're going to give it to Maya first, who was listening in on the groups, to share some reflections that she heard across group. And then we'll ask for each group to share out any additional things from their group in relation to what Maya offers. Okay, Maya.
Thank you, everybody, for very interesting discussions. I hopped around groups and I heard several common themes. So just to start off, you sharing out your ideas. There is a lot of discussion about this inherent power relationship between an evaluator and groups that interventions are targeting. And even though there are a lot of words about the importance of inclusion, funders are not really dedicating sufficient funds to make sure that processes are participatory. And even when we are trying to make sure that they participate, those who participate are not necessarily the groups who we are targeting. We see educated, more active people raising their voices, while people who are most marginalized are participating the least. So there are a lot of discussions about this in the groups, about partnership, about critical feedback, that we don't receive feedback from people who are not funders, who are really who we are targeting and whose feedback we want about the evaluation findings. So it was great to hear about what evaluators can do to push funders to make this change beyond words. Even though we are not always, we don't always have this power to make changes, then funders are ultimately the ones who have money. What are some of the ways we can make the change? So it would be great to hear from individual groups. What are main takeaways for you from the discussions that you had? Should we maybe start from the first group to hear about white supremacy?
I can share from our group, unless anyone else wants to.
Thank you, Halia.
Of course. So one thing that we talked about, I'll touch upon two things. First was this idea of white supremacy and intersectionality, right? So white supremacy can show up in ways other than race and kind of how we navigate those other things. So it can look different based on where we are and who we are. And so navigating maybe pieces of white supremacy that we might be less vigilant about, but also things that are very present to us. And one thing that we kind of left as a challenge that we're all thinking about, or that we're thinking about in general, is this movement from individual agency when thinking about white supremacy, and then shifting it towards a larger organizational change. So like, how do we get from being individuals, like working towards this goal, to actually having this larger movement within the organization?
Thanks, Ailey. So yeah, looking at our time, we've got about 30 seconds to a minute per group, which group number 2, I think is group number 2 the critical feedback group.
I took the little group takeaway in the upper corner, so I can share and quickly for our group. But a really great discussion, and we talked a little bit. Maya hit on a lot of points that we talked about. Is that sometimes as evaluators, we find ourselves as sort of the intermediaries between funders and impacted communities, or the affected communities that programs are trying to serve. And the feedback isn't necessarily built in from the start, although funders are more and more looking for that and looking for creative ways to do that. So sometimes it's really for us to decide to help them figure out how we can integrate and embed this into our work. But we have to think really critically when we're doing that about what are the benefits and what are the trade-offs for doing that, and what are ways that we can do that to honor the time, the commitment, and the experiences of communities. And so we're looking for ways that we can exchange with this group and others, the wider group rather, on strategies to creative ways to do this as well. So hopefully that's something we can pick up on as an emergent strategy.
Great, thanks, Drew. And what about room 4?
So I took notes. So some of the things have already been said. The role of the evaluator is a privileged position, regardless of our individual identities and privileges. So there is an inherent power dynamic. So we have to be clear about our role and our purpose and what we can offer, so we're not more extractive of people in community of their time, energy, knowledge, and resources. And we have to be very disciplined about not offering advice, even if maybe there might be times when our clients ask for that advice, right? It's not our place, it's not our role. We're really there to hold space and lift up.
Thank you, Trish. John in room 5.
Yeah, so we were talking about kind of how our professional training really kind of has shaped some, thinking and kind of how it privileges rigor amongst, particular evaluation teams, and as if that inevitably leads to that is the most rigorous is always the most right evaluation, even if it's not serving our who we're trying to work with. So we were kind of unpacking that and how that kind of plays out, in designing evaluations.
Thanks, John. And room 10? Room 10 was our journey mapping discussion, I think. Did anyone from that room want to share a few points?
I can talk. Hi, everyone. So we talked a lot about journey mapping in general, and something that we all realized was kind of how our own experiences early in life really informed how we interact with the world and observe the world. And we didn't even have time to get to how that always affects our evaluation practice. But I think because it affects our ways of being in the world and our ways that we observe ourselves in the world. It's impacted our roles as evaluators and how we see others in the world, and when we work with other people in the world.
Thank you, Chantal. Okay, so given time, we have a few updates, and I noticed a couple questions in the chat. Yes, we will have facilitators next time so that there's somebody taking notes in each group just to alleviate that. I think I don't have the right share screen, Andres. Sorry, you are sharing screen. It's on me. 1 second. Can you switch slides? I know sometimes people have to run right to meetings, so we've got a couple of updates. Oh, our image didn't stay. But just to like zoom sort of out from this session. So the first topic was around self and team. And I know these overlap and intersect, which that fractal concept reminds us of that. The same patterns, the same issues are going to show up, but we are going to move out, and our next topic will be about funding and commissioning, as well as the contract. So that is, came up in this topic as well. And then in terms of the initiative, there are a couple of things we're working on and we've hit, a barrier with. One of them is social system mapping. So we were hoping, and we will work toward, but we've got some BC IRB stuff happening to get permissions to do this, but a way that will ask you to participate in a map of the network, telling a little bit of information about yourself, so then we can easily connect with each other. So that's something that's in progress, and we'll share updates by email. These are things happening in between this event and the April event. The other thing which we would love input on, and so this is a question in the feedback form as well, we had this idea to have collab streams, which is basically, a cooler version of a work stream, right? Where you find the issue that you care about, the thing you want to work on. It could be something as specific as what Drew was speaking to, since I was in that group. This idea of how do you structure critical feedback externally from communities or beneficiaries in a way that's fair, and beneficial for them as well. That could be the issue. And then you, with others, put together some strategies around that you can share back with the network. We've built into the grant some support for that. So like we've got at least $300. We might have more that we can give to your team, maybe just for food for when you meet. But what would be useful to you? We've got grad students and other students at the institution, and we have ways to compensate them for their time. So if you need support administratively, let us know. But we want to figure out what some of these streams are going to be about, and then get you connected to get them rolling out. Because at the end of this initiative in April 2023, we're hoping we have some real tangible contributions that can be distributed within the network that were generated through our process of learning together. So one way to do that is to go to the Slack channel and offer some ideas. You can also email us, put it in the feedback forum, and then we're going to probably have a pop-up meeting just for people who want to do some collab stream to brainstorm and connect to get some of those ideas rolling. And the raffle. Joe, I don't know if you're here and can quickly go through names, and then we've got your email, so we'll follow up with you with the gift card.
Yeah, the raffle was a fun challenge throughout this meeting. I started with the full registration, and then I had to adapt as we went. Everyone on the list was here at some point, and many might not be here anymore. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. So the winners are the first 15 I'm going to call. And I apologize if I get your name wrong. Sonia Barron, Sophia Mansouri, Janet Smith, Taylor Hazan, Nina Chantana, Amy Gray, Lisa Natkin, Tamara Perkins, Kayla Benitez Alvarez, Cynthia Char, Matan Ben-Yeshe, Jade Lee, Alyssa Saunders, and Amanda Sutter.
Great. So you get a little funds towards what book you might want, and we'll be in touch by email to send that to you. A really quick addressing a question in the chat about Slack. So if you're not on the Slack channel, just email us back to the email you got, this email. We'll make sure you have that link. That we're literally seeing how it goes. I would say there are 84 people on it. You get on it, it's a workspace if you haven't used Slack before. There are channels. One of the channels is just to share job opportunities or contract opportunities and RFPs. That one is popular, so people are sharing opportunities you can hear about in the network that way. There's one around resources, so you hear about a resource, you put it there, and then again, we can sort of crowdsource what's coming out. Then there are a couple other channels like book club. What are some books that you're into, you're reading? And then we were hoping, or not, I shouldn't say hoping, we're not attached to this strategy, but we were thinking about if a Collab stream has a Slack channel, like has a channel on the Slack workspace, it could be a really easy way to communicate, but also for others to sort of see the way that the direction of the project is going. I did this in a complex systems workshop and it worked well because people can come in and out, but you can still sort of see the record of how the project is developing. So that's another way we might use it. But Kathleen, I'm happy to answer, or we can show you anything in Slack too, and anybody else who's thinking about using it. But it might stick. I think probably the RFP function will stick past the initiative, and we'll see sort of what other pieces of it might be useful that then GBen would host. So I think that's it. Did someone put the feedback form in the chat? Maya, I don't know if you have that handy, Kayla or somebody else. Please do take time to give us some feedback on the event. We put thought into them and are trying to hold this space. So we would love your input. And I think so Trish, thank you, Trish, just dropped that feedback form in there. I know I just said a bunch of words, but I want to be sensitive to the end of the timing too. We will follow up by email. Thank you for being here, for making time. It's really just fun, honestly, to see everybody's faces and then see some connections across what we're thinking about and where we're at, but together. Any scene team things? Okay, great. We will linger, by the way. We've got 5 or 10 more minutes in the space. So if you want to linger and you have something to say or just say hello, we're here, but I'll stop the recording.